And here are details of this story. Polls have opened in Kenya, though there are 8 presidential candidates. For many, it is actually a straight choice between incumbent President Uhuru Kenyatta and the veteran opposition challenger, who is also the ex-Prime Minister, Raila Odinga. Odinga has said this is the last time he will stand for the presidency. The elections, however, is not just a presidential battle. Kenyans will also choose governors for the country's 47 counties and will also be electing new MPs and the Senate. Let us now take a look at some of the statistics for the elections. As you can see on your screen, 19.6 million are eligible to vote in this election. And just as we said earlier, there are 8 presidential candidates and 290 constituencies. The country is for first-time voting. The country also has a first-time voting via an electronic system.
Absolutely, Jerry. And you evaluated it a few moments ago. The race is coming close between 2 favorites of the ballot, the outgoing President Uhuru Kenyatta and his long-time rival and opponent, the flag-bearer of NASA, Raila Odinga. Uhuru Kenyatta, son of the country's first president, Jomo Kenyatta, has been president since 2013 and is running for a second term of 5 years, while Raila Odinga probably fights his last presidential race as he is 72 years. The point on these 2 familiar characters on the Kenyan political scene.
And now live with us.
55-year-old Uhuru Kenyatta was the youngest in Kenya's history to become president in 2013. Before he was elected for the first term, Kenyatta was a deputy prime minister in the Mwai Kibaki government when his main challenger Raila Odinga was prime minister. He has been riding on his economic achievements in expanding transport infrastructure to woo voters for a second term. We have started building the railway. It will pass through this county of Nakuru. Here in Naivasha, we want to construct an industrial park, a special economic zone that will create employment for our young people. Uhuru has not always been a politician. The shy son of the country's first president, Jomo Kenyatta, grew up in wealth. He surfaced on the political scene after former President Moi named him as his successor in 2001. Kenyatta lost the bid to Kibaki, but backed him to win the disputed 2007 elections, in which over 1,000 people were killed and more than 600,000 were displaced in the ensuing violence. Uhuru Kenyatta and his running mate William Ruto were both indicted by the ICC in 2011 for inciting ethnic violence. The charges were later dropped against the two. With Kenyatta coming up against his old foe Odinga again in Tuesday's election, which has also been run on ethnic lines, there are still fears it could be a repeat of the 2007 post-election violence.
Raila Odinga, the main opposition aspirant of the presidential election in Kenya, will be running against President Uhuru Kenyatta and 6 others. Some see him as the much-needed social reformer in the country. Others see him as a populist, prompt to manipulating communities. Raila Odinga has been a long-time opponent at 72 years of age. This might be his last chance of being a president, his 4th attempt. He believes he was robbed of victory in 2007 and challenged the result in 2013. The NASA leader has already threatened to take to the streets with his supporters in case of defeat or fraud.
The youth of Kenya who have led this revolution, this is a youth revolution for change in our country. And the change will come on the 8th, Tuesday next week.
But who is the 72-year-old seeking Kenya's presidency? Born in 1945, he is named a Social Democrat. But despite decades of political activity, the former Prime Minister of the National Union government between 2008 and 2013 remained an enigma to many of his fellow citizens. The Kikuyu people, however, fear he would nationalize their properties once in power. 10 years after the post-election violence in 2007, which had led to over 1,000 deaths and 500,000 displaced, the international community fears new clashes.
President
Kenyatta
and his opponent Raila Odinga have both called their supporters and all their fellow citizens to move in mass to express their voice today. But the population, still traumatized by the post-election violence of 2007, takes its precautions. In the streets of the capital, Nairobi, the atmosphere seemed charged yesterday, according to a special envoy Michael Oduor, who was able to question some inhabitants about their expectations about these elections.
I think on transparency, the Electoral Commission had some challenges, but we believe that by the end of the day, when the elections are done, we'll gauge whether they are transparent or not. But we as Kenyans, we are expecting that the elections will run smoothly, despite the fact that there is tension, and we believe that IEBC will do all they can to ensure that we get results that are fair, that both parties will agree to.
There is no tension in the country. In fact, I will advise most of my colleagues who are staying in Nairobi, if you have a vote here in Nairobi, there's no need to travel up country. Just stay around. I think even the Kenya police has promised that they are going to do their best to make sure that there is enough peace around the country. There is no need, we've not seen any tension anywhere, and I hope this is almost all people are just saying that no, we want a peaceful election, despite the fact that we want change.
I'm a Kenyan. What I'm urging Kenyans is to vote in a peaceful manner. There will be Kenya after election. What I'm urging is peaceful election, and we thank God peace and unity.
I expect there's going to be a huge, a massive turnout, majority from the youth and of course from the elderly.
And now live on the phone with us from Nairobi is Africanews journalist Michael Odua. Michael, thank you very much for being with us this morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Jerry.
Okay. It's an early call for you, Michael, but doesn't this just underscore the seriousness of this for Kenya? You know, we want to know, as the polls opened?
Yes, Jerry, the polls opened at 6 a.m., majority opened at 6 a.m., and some were reportedly open 6 minutes after 6 a.m. But then something that has really been, that will be on record for long, is that Kenyans this time came out. Some even slept at the polling stations in fear of long queues. And on this, we have long queues in various polling stations within the country. And right here in Nairobi, I've visited like 3 polling stations, and what I've seen are long queues, and people are voting. People are coming out, all the young, the youths coming to vote. But then as this happened, you know, thousands have come out to these polling stations, and but we managed to speak to some of them, and what they were complaining about the long voting process. But because, you know, this time Kenya is doing the biometric, whereby they have to recognize the biometric means, and then before you vote. But this time, you know, Kenyans are voting 6 slots. This includes the member of parliament, the member of county assembly, the senator, the women representative, the governor, and also the president. And when it comes to president, we have over 8 candidates that Kenyans will be voting, and that includes Uhuru Kenyatta, who is the current president, and the long-time opposition leader, that is Raila Odinga. And apart from that, the voting will continue up to 5 p.m. Local time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Michael, there's no doubt that this is very huge for Kenya, obviously, and it's very interesting that the voting has started already. But going by some polls in Kenya, no candidate will be able to maybe get the first round done with. So maybe we are expecting that there may be a tie in the first round of voting. Is this a general feeling in Kenya?
Yes, Jerry. In Kenya, you know, we've been having several opinion polls that have been conducted here and there, but then some actually picks the president ahead of the opposition leader Raila Odinga, and some even at times they contradict. Some they pick that Raila Odinga at times ahead of Uhuru Kenyatta. But then when you look at the figures, they don't surpass the 50% plus 1 vote. But then when you look around, people are motivated to vote so as to bring change to the leadership and governance in different areas. And at other times, yesterday when we spoke to Nairobians, they expressed the need for free, fair, and credible elections that will guarantee peace in the country. Then looking at the recent polls, it's evident that also none of the 2 main presidential contenders, Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, will also garner the 50% plus 1 vote. And Odinga is making his 4th attempt to gain power. He claims that elections in 2007 and 2013 were stolen from him. But then Kenyatta, on the other side, will be constitutionally barred for the third term if victorious this time, while Odinga will be prevented by age after previous failure from mounting a further challenge in 2022. And then the campaigns have been bruising. Each of the two major camps have exuded confidence of winning the election come today. Speaking on the same crowd, but at different time, each camp has always shown ability to mobilize the numbers. Jerry.
Michael, thank you. Michael, 10 years ago, just 10 years ago, post-election violence resulted in the death of about 1,000 Kenyans, sadly. And this time around, there are fears that there might be, something. Because Raila Odinga, the veteran opposition challenger, said that this will be his last. And also, this is the second time this is the second and the last time for the incumbent President Uhuru Kenyatta. Is this fear really real?
Yes, Jerry, anything is possible on this election. It's unpredictable. And as we spoke to Kenyans, we actually came to understand that most of them are pushing for credibility, fairness, transparency on these elections. But then when you look at Kenya in 2007, Kenya banned. And for instance, there are several Kenyans in vulnerable areas that have fled homes in fear of violence. These towns, they include Nairobi, Naivasha, Nakuru, and Eldoret. These are the most affected. These were the most affected areas during the 2007 violence. The contested polls in 2007 led to over 1,000 deaths, and violence swept the country again if the losing party refuses to accept the results. But then looking at that. But then the National Police Service on Sunday said that over 150,000 officers drawn from the Kenya Police, the Administration Police, General Service Unit, and the Directorate of Criminal Investigation, that the CID, will help maintain order across the country. The distribution of the police officer was done with consideration of the perceived threats on those vulnerable areas. So we hope that security will be guaranteed during the elections. And even today in the morning when we were going across, we saw that it was there, even in the CBD, in the polling station, everything was going to be fine. So we hope this will not repeat itself, Jerry.
I hope that there will not be violence this time around. Okay, so how soon should we expect the results of these elections? Michael?
The results for these elections, Jerry, will be announced within 7 days after voting. Normally, that's how the Constitution of Kenya dictates that IEBC timeline should release results 7 days. But then, apart from that, we have various levels at which these results will be released. We have the polling sessions, we have the constituency level, we also have the county level, and then we have the national level. But then the county level going up to the polling level will start. They'll start getting results maybe 2 hours, 3 hours after the closure of the polling station. But then when looking at this tally verification announcement and declaration of the national set will also begin at Tuesday and go on until 14. August 15th will be the last day for declaring the results. That will be 7 days after the last vote was cast. Jerry.
Thank you very much, Michael. Michael Odor, qui est notre envoyé spécial.
Michael Odor will continue to provide with us the latest information from Nairobi throughout the day. As I said in the headlines, Kenyans, as the international community, dreads the worst after announcing the results of the presidential. The calls for peace have multiplied over the last few days. Among the voices that have risen, that of the former U.S. President Barack Obama, who pointed out in a communique that Kenyans know better than anyone of unnecessary suffering endured during the worst violent crisis of 2007. Obama has called on the latter to build on the advances of recent years rather than putting them in jeopardy. Former South African President Thabo Mbeki, who heads the Union Observation Mission sent by African Union, former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, at the center of the observation mission of Carter Center. The representatives of the European Parliament government and also IGAD, the regional organization in particular, have also called for peace.
L'enjeu sécuritaire qui entoure cette élection présidentielle et générale au Kenya. Nous sommes en ligne.
To try to better understand the security risks surrounding this election, we have a political analyst, Barak Muluka, in Nairobi. Hello, Barak Muluka. Opposition leader Raila Odinga said over the weekend that the incumbent was to rig the election. Will you say that these pronouncements are premature, just days to an already tensed atmosphere?
Le contexte tendu dans lequel se déroule justement ce scrutin.
I wouldn't call it premature. There have been legitimate concerns. For example, the IEBC did print an extra 1.2 million ballot papers for the presidential vote, which they did not tell anybody about until one of the contestants in one of the minor parties went to Dubai, where the printing was taking place. And having assessed the situation, he came back and reported that we then witnessed the IBC trying to explain that this was because of the technical details of printing and that they would account for that. Now, where you have not proactively brought that into the public limelight, the opposition has every cause to feel a little bit alarmed. It's also true that in upwards polling stations, they are saying that they are not able to transmit the results using the agreed-upon system, which is the electronic system, and that would be done manually. Obviously, there's need for the red flag in that kind of area. And I think that these concerns are being raised now rather than after.
Barak,
how much has ethnicity played during the campaigning, and will it also have an impact on the results?
Pourrait avoir un impact finalement sur les résultats de cette élection. J'ai l'impression qu'on a perdu la connexion avec Monsieur
Muluka. We are having a problem with connections with Barak Muluka in Nairobi.
Alors, je vous posais la question de savoir dans quelle mesure est-ce que la question ethnique.
The question was about how much ethnicity has played during the campaigning, and will it have an impact on the results of these elections?
Right from the dawn of independence, this country has politically defined itself along ethnic lines and divisions. All elections have taken into account the question of the ethnic character of the country. If you look at even the present political formation, that the ethnic card is going to be very significant. On the one side, you have got the government that is defending the incumbency, and it is basically a composite of two major ethnic communities. The Kikuyu, you see that people within those communities are leaning on one side. Then you've got about another 30 or so tribes of the Luo, the Kamba, the Luya. So it's going to be an ethnic roll call without a doubt.
And that was political analyst speaking to us from Kenya, Barak Muluka. A very big thank you to you indeed.